Hello, and welcome to another Arizona Hip Historian Virtual Happy Hour Tour. That's a lot to say, and we're excited about it. I am Brenda Holt with the Arizona State Office of AARP. We are the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. With a nationwide presence and nearly 38 million members across the nation, and approximately 900,000 right here in Arizona, we work to strengthen our communities and we advocate for what matters most to our families: health security, financial stability, personal fulfillment, healthy living, just to name a few. During the month of November, we are going to be covering caregiving. We're here to help you navigate planning for you and your loved ones' future care. Don't leave decisions around your home, your health, and your finances to someone else. You want to be in the driver's seat. So visit us for more resources and information at aarp.org/caregiving or aarp.org/Arizona. We hope you enjoy these weekly sessions, and we want to say to you, Happy Thanksgiving.
Ladies and gentlemen, non-binary folk, welcome to the show. Get ready to meet your host for the night, Arizona's very own hip historian himself, Marshall Shore.
Well, hello and good evening. I want to welcome you all to Arizona History Happy Hour. I am so glad that you can join us tonight. We've got another amazing show for you coming right up. So I want to welcome all of you who are watching on a variety of things. There's Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. I mean, the list just keeps going on and on and on. So happy that you can be here this evening. Now, my name is Marshall Shore, and today is November 10th. So with Arizona history, back in 1993, not that long ago, Governor Fife Symington, Phoenix Mayor Paul Johnson, former Major League catcher Joe Garagiola, and several other prominent businessmen gathered outside of America West Arena as the Phoenix Suns president, Jerry Colangelo, outlined plans to bring a Major League Baseball franchise right here to Arizona. That's right. We got the Diamondbacks. And so that happened today back in 93. They started doing all that planning to make just that happen. So also it is National Sesame Street Day. Back on November 10th, back in 1969, that show went on air for the first time. And so, one thing I think is interesting is we actually are some youth down in South Phoenix because of Southminster Church, who was a early Head Start location site. They also had friends who were working on something called Sesame Street. And so they wound up getting kind of a little preview and being part of the test market to figure out what was Sesame Street going to really be like. So it is also National Area Code Day. Back in 1940, we stopped using all those letters to start with, like Alpine 567, things like that. And actually 602, 202, that's when those all came about. And so we choose to celebrate that on November 10th. All the way back from 1940. Now it is indeed also National Vanilla Cupcake Day. Now, cupcakes have been called fairy cakes, patty cakes, and cupcakes, as well as cupcakes. all one word, two words. Originally they date back to the first time a recipe shows up for them was back in 1829, and they were originally baked in heavy pottery cups, hence the name cupcakes. Now, as Andrew says, happy Veterans Day as we get ready for Veterans Day tomorrow. Today is the anniversary of the Marines. Back in 1775, the Continental Congress first established the Continental Marines, leading up to the American Revolution. And so, that's a lot of what's going on today, and we've got a great show for you this evening. So what can you expect? Well, we always have a little bit of trivia. We've got a little Arizona town. We've got some Arizona music history. We've got From the Vault, which is something people might drive by sometimes and not realize how beautiful it really is. There is, of course, a beverage as well and a special guest. So if this is your first time here, you might wonder, who is that man and why is he on my screen? Well, my name is Marshall Shore. I got here a little over 23 years ago. I was working in a beautiful Carnegie building back in New York and decided to trade all that wind, that snow, and that slush for a whole different kettle of fish. And decided that, you can't shovel sunshine. So wound up here in Phoenix, where I was working at a little library in Central Phoenix, actually South Phoenix. And there was this rich oral tradition of the community. And so that really got me looking at, I think, Arizona in a whole different way from the very moment I landed here. It was all about the stories, and it still is. Now, we promptly moved into a beautiful 1956 ranch, and, it used to be lots of beiges, plural, sadly. It is now just two-tone, seafoam and cantaloupe. And there's what my kitchen looks like today. Lots of buttercream yellow tile with matching appliances that still work like a charm. Now, as soon as we got here, all we kept hearing about how there was no history. But I knew that wasn't true because every time I went somewhere, whether it was on foot, on a bike, in a car, it didn't matter how I was getting around. I kept running into so many amazing people, places, and stories. And then there's that post-war boom that I think in a lot of ways made the Arizona that we all know and love. All those GIs that either had stationed here, trained here, or passed on somewhere else, after the war, they were moving to Arizona, looking for a whole new way of life, which many of them found, and changing Arizona forever. Now, I'm also called the hip historian, and it's been kind of a busy week. There's been all kinds of cool stuff going on. We're still doing stuff with Local Buzz, which is a really cool app you can download on your phone. We have coming up on Saturday our Haunted History Tour. Saturday night. I was like, nope, tonight's Thursday. So yes, so indeed. So Saturday night, we'll be launching that from downtown. The weather should be spectacular for that. And, it is Festivus time. Right around the corner in a little over a month is going to be I think it's the 11th year it's been going on. And I've been involved every year since the very beginning. And so it's going to be really cool. Now, I just saw they just announced something. And so since it's Festivus, with kind of a holiday theme. So, they're going to have a hip Santa. One guess who hip Santa is going to be this year. If you guessed the hip historian, you are indeed right. So I'm going to be greeting all kinds of folks. So you definitely will be wanting to come out and check out Festivus downtown mid-December. And just after Thanksgiving, I'm going to be in Bisbee at the beautiful historic Greenway House. So that's going to be a lot of fun and an interesting evening for an event we are calling Dinner and Seance. And this poster just came out today. I literally just got it about like a half hour before we even went live tonight. And so what's really cool is this is for an educational burlesque show. So we are calling it Arizona Unzipped. And it's going to be, I will be telling stories about Arizona, and then Pyra Sutra and all of her dancers will be doing dance numbers inspired by those stories. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And also at the Spectacular Orpheum. Now, it's not coming up until March, so there's plenty of time. But, you know, we've got to get that things out so people can block it off on the calendar, because it will be an event not to be missed. And also, I'm just starting to put Arizona's Happy Hour up on Spotify as a podcast. And it might even be there as a video as well as just an audio podcast. If anybody wants to check it out, maybe you should let me know what I did. You know, there's a little box you click on, and who knows what I've really done. But all right, so now we come to the point where we have a little bit of refreshment. So let's see if we can bring on. There we go. My silent bartender, Bob. And so PJ has cooked up something he is calling a Canadian cooler. So it's got a little bit of Canadian Club whiskey, 12-year, the good stuff. Some also Del Bach, Normandy, as well as Bisbee, blood orange tonic. Oh, and you can definitely see the blood orange in there. All right, as well as some mango puree and agave sour. All right, so there we have our Canadian Club cooler. Now let's... Oh, PJ, that's really good. You know, so his kind of impetus for this was, so Del Bach is from Southern Arizona, which is where you might notice my background is. And there'll be a reason why coming up in just a few minutes. And now when he thinks of Southern Arizona and those wild breath brothels, it's like, you know, things are considered sexy, from perfumes to the wines to those undergarments, almost unmentionable. This special whiskey from Del Bach is aged in French apple brandy barrels. Oh, that's interesting. That's where that little flavor comes in. Okay, so there you go. See, that's what I mean, you know, PJ, thank you so much for keeping me educated about booze. So there you go. All right, so now we come to now I see many of you have found the chat. Thank you so much for that. If you don't get something in the chat, or you want to reach out and let me know about something else, that's really good. I'm gonna have another sip of that. So you can always reach out on Facebook, Instagram, email, even via my website, and it's all Hip Historian themed. So Google Hip Historian, you'll find me one way or another. And all right, so now we are going to talk about Little Arizona, a small town, Patagonia, which is in Santa Cruz County, has a population of just under 800. It was founded back in 1891. Now, that does not mean the first people that lived there got there then. This area in Patagonia has been home to indigenous communities for quite a long time. It offered plentiful hunting, fishing opportunities, and even you can find petroglyphs surrounding Patagonia. The area was known by the Tono Autumn as Rancheria, a seasonal village. So welcome to Patagonia. Now, the first folks that were not indigenous were, you had Marcos de Niza coming in back in the early 1500s. Then you had Father Kino coming through. And eventually in the 1850s, you had silver coming in. And it said that there were Welsh miners who had come in from Patagonia and Patagonia mountains in South America. And they thought that those mountains reminded them of those Patagonia mountains. And so they started calling it Patagonia, even though the folks who were already living there called them something else. The name became Patagonia. Now, back in 1854, the Gadsden Purchase happened, and it became not part of Mexico, but now it was part of Arizona, or actually the territories, the U.S. And by 1917, there was a 2-story depot. They had running water, an opera house. It was quite the luxe place. They had schoolhouses. I mean, education was quite important. And so you can still go and see some of those early buildings that are still there. In fact, look at this beautiful library. I mean, that at one point was a hotel. And again, another beautiful schoolhouse just after statehood. And then Patagonia State Park opened its doors in 1975. And this is where you can find lots of petroglyphs and has a great place to camp that overlooks a man-made lake. Because, you know, we got a few of those. You can also stop and have a bite to eat at Velvet Elvis, where you can stare at a lovely black velvet portrait of Elvis. As well as you can stop and get your high spirit flute, which I just happened to be able to find where mine was. I thought it was over on the bookshelf, and indeed it was. All right. So, you know, one of the things I love about Arizona Happy Hour is you don't just get to hear me talk, you get to hear other people. In some cases, probably even more interesting and at least different stories. I guess that's probably a better thing to say, just different stories than I have. And so I am going to bring on my friend Jason. Hello.
Good evening, Marshall.
So okay. So folks that may not know who you are, so tell us a little about yourself.
Okay, so
and you just froze.
Oh, well, I'll start. So I'm the library manager of the Copper Queen Library, the oldest continuously operated library in the state of Arizona, right here in Bisbee, right there. And right now I'm sitting up on the 3rd floor under the red light. That's
how cool!
Yeah, don't mind the piles of books behind me.
That's how we know it's a library. All right. Now, so when we have special guests, we also have trivia. And the fun thing about our trivia is it is based more in terms of not just what you know, but the fun thing is we're going to go through the questions and then we're going to come back and talk about the answers and the stories behind them. So that's lots of fun. And so I see Anita's joining us. So I already know she has her special notebook out. And, you know, some folks keep track of their answers for trivia in the chat. But, you know, you can do it however you would like. It's all good. All right. So let's have our first question. And, you know, and there's some good ones. Oh, my gosh. I can hardly wait to hear some of these stories. All right. So question 1. Which famous artist lived in Bisbee in the 40s? Was it Ted DeGrazia, B. Willem de Kooning, C. Mark Rothko, or D. Edward Hopper? So which one of those artists do you think lived in Bisbee in the 40s? All right, question 2. If you connected all of the mining tunnels under Bisbee, what is the furthest destination you'd be able to reach? So putting them all kind of like, I guess, like straws, end to end to end. So would you be able to get all the way to Houston? or maybe B, Washington, D.C., or oh my gosh, even Mexico City or Seattle. So, how many miles of tunnels do you think are under Bisbee? And how far do you think they would reach? Question. Oh, and Naco. Naco. All right. Our question 3 is Naco, Arizona is famous for what event? A, discovery of gold. B, Bisbee deportation. C, the first capture of a chupacabra. Oh my gosh, how terrifying. Or D, the first aerial bombardment of the U.S. All right, so it is indeed one of those. All right. So question 4, name the poltergeist for mischief in rooms at the Copper Queen Hotel. Oh, was it A, Johnny, B, Billy, C, Sophia, or D, Elsa? Which one of those is the name of a poltergeist at the Copper Queen Hotel? All right, question 5. 300-year floods occurred in August of which, wait a minute, in August of which year? 3 100-year floods, okay, occurred in August. Wow. Okay, so there was one year that was really bad for floods. Which year was it? Was it A, 1887, B, 1917, C, 1908, or D, 1955? So which year do you think had 3 100-year floods in it? All right, question 6. Who was Felix who worked and lived underground at the Sacramento shaft? Was Felix A, a Serbian immigrant, B, an orphan adopted by the miners, C, a black cat, or D, a canary in the mine? So Felix was one of those. Which do you think Felix was? All right. Question 7. What author wrote about Bisbee in their novel Tacey Cromwell? Was it A, Carson McCullers, B, Conrad Richter, C, Evelyn Wang, or D, Graham Greene? So who wrote about Bisbee in their novel Tacey Cromwell? All right. And from the early 1800s to 1915, Bisbee had how many saloons? Was it A, 55, B, 10, C, 160, or D, saloons were abandoned in Bisbee until 1955? Oh, what do you think? All right. Moving on to question 9, coming down the home stretch now. All right, question 9, the Bisbee deportation sent striking miners to which location? A, Columbus, New Mexico, B, Phoenix, Arizona, C, Hermosillo, Sonora, Mexico, or D, Tombstone, Arizona? So the Bisbee deportation sent those striking miners where? All right. And question 10, what remains were found outside of Bisbee in the early 1950s? A, a mammoth, B, a dinosaur, C, serial killer victims, or D, a giant ground sloth? Wow. Okay. So what do you think what remains were found outside of Bisbee in the early 50s? All right. So we are going to, while you are doing all of that, we are going to take a little bit of an Arizona music break and talk about Shep Cook, who just passed away back on November 7th. He was a Tucson bass musician. He moved here in the late 30s with his family. In the early 60s, he met Linda Ronstadt, and they played in a little beatnik cafe, a couple live shows, and then she left for LA. Now he started some other bands, and Linda called him up in the 60s and said, "Hey, come join me in LA." And he said, "No, I'm not going to come out and join the Stone Ponies. My band here is just taking off." Well, that didn't happen. So she called him again. And again, he said, "I think all that I'm doing right now is getting ready to take off." And it didn't. So that same year, late 1960s, she called him again. And he was like, I can't really turn Linda Ronstadt down. So he became a member of the Stone Ponies, and he worked on their third album and recorded. He then, after playing around the country on that, decided that he would go off on his own, did 2 albums, basically became part of like the sound of Arizona. And so he just passed away. So good night and condolences to your family. All right. So now who's ready for some answers as we get ready to have some fun? All right. So which famous artist lived in Bisbee in the 40s? Ted DeGrazia.
Ted DeGrazia. Yes. So Ted met a woman named Alexandra, and they wed in 1936. And they moved to Bisbee so DeGrazia could manage our Lyric Theater, which is a really cool theater that unfortunately is no longer a theater, and was just purchased to become a hotel. So,
Oh my gosh, I had no idea.
Yeah, I don't know how you make a hotel out of a theater, but that's supposedly what's going to happen. So DeGrazia. Okay, yeah. So I've included a lot of pictures because, as I was telling Marshall, when I started investigating these answers, it just led to so much more information, and it was I just had so much fun. And DeGrazia was known for his later works. He had his the Los Niños, children there on the right, but here his early works here. They're pretty striking, and that Working on the Railroad was painted while he lived in Bisbee, and the same with Viva in 1940. So yeah, DeGrazia, he got his full name Ettore. He was an Italian immigrant. He lived in Bisbee for a few years, was unknown, and, Arizona Highways kind of found him and started publishing some of his works in their publication. And, I know him from his gallery in the Sun in Tucson, which, if you have not been, is amazing. And it just, his works and his home and his studio and his garden is all there, and really quite spectacular. And I think it's pretty cool that he spent time in Bisbee. And then we can go to that Lyric Theater.
I know, this was such a cool story. I'm like, oh my gosh, who knew?
Yeah, so look at the crowd in front of the Lyric. That's and I included a picture of what the inside of the theater looks like today. It's still there, and there's been some when they filmed the documentary Bisbee 17, they had a scene in there which was really cool. But yeah, the Roscoe Conklin Arbuckle. He was a vaudeville entertainer, and he appeared in Bisbee in the early 1900s. And this theater saw a lot of really, big acts, because Bisbee back in the day was a big deal. It still is, but A lot of people lived here, and a lot of people.
And then I think for a while, the Opera House was also like a real estate office.
Yeah, so the Lyric Theater was, until it was just sold recently, it was Bisbee Realty's office, and they had their offices up front, but if you asked nicely, they would show you the back there, which is pictured there.
Very cool. And then talking about DeGrazio's
So yeah,
Gallery.
I also, of course, included if further research. I was picking books out of our library's collection, just for people wanting to know more. I've got some picks there.
Very cool. Now, my friend Anita says her husband says that he would go see movies at the Lyric when he lived in Warren.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm not sure when it closed, but all we really want is that to be opened again and to be able to go see movies and shows there. It was built in the time when those theater houses were grand, and that's in the fashion of the Fox Theater in Tucson. So yeah.
Yep. So we shall see what happens.
Times change.
Indeed, times are a changing. All right. So question 2, if you connect all those tunnels under Bisbee, how far can you go?
Isn't that amazing? You can make it all the way to Washington, D.C., 2,200 miles. I love this question, and I've used this question before with when we do kids programs, because it really puts things into perspective. We've got so many tunnels, and this is a really interesting fact here, that there are no tunnels under Old Bisbee. So a lot of people think Bisbee is just all of Old Town. And because of the fault line, they could not dig under Old Town. And so these tunnels are, they're everywhere. I have a good source, Doug Graham, who works at the Queen Mine Tour. His family, he grew up here, and he, when him and his friends played, they played in the tunnels. That's what they did back in the day. And so he knows the underground. Like, he could get from where the Queen Mine Tour is, he could make his way through anywhere, and he could just pop up anywhere in Bisbee and just pop his head out of the ground. That's how well he knows this stuff. But it's intricate, and when you think about tunnels, they're not all on the same level. There's tunnels way underground. There's more surface tunnels. It's really complicated, and it's an amazing feat of humanity to dig all of that out. And there's a map. And obviously, if you come to Bisbee, you have to take the Queen Mine Tour. It's really
it really is amazing. I mean, it's one of those, you gotta do it.
It is. And when you talk about your happy hour, there's a room down there that I always, every time I'm down there, like, why is this not a restaurant? Why is this not a bar? It would be it would be fantastic, but there's liability stuff. So
right.
And then I just included, so a lot of these pictures.
This you're talking about, the Great Room.
Yes, this is one of the rooms that, look at that. I mean, that they used to have fraternity meetings in these rooms.
It's like it looks like a lodge or something.
It does, and it's like, come on, like look at how many people they fit in there.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, and then you're looking at the middle picture there. You can see these tunnels. They took all that ore out of there. The picture on the left is a shaft. That's how miners actually got down into the tunnels. When they went to work, they went there. And a lot of these pictures are all from we have a collection of photographs that someone back in the day made these wonderful collages of these beautiful photographs, and we had a scanning project, and we scanned them all so we could have a digital collection of them. But yeah, they're really, really amazing to look at. Really, and whoever was taking them, they seem professional. Really high quality.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're really good. All right, so what kind of things did they mine in Bisbee? I mean, you've got, there we have Lowell, which is going away.
Right. So that's if you've been to Bisbee, you've seen the big hole in the ground, and what people don't realize is that hole swallowed up communities. All that's left of Lowell is a strip of buildings. It's still very cool, and we're happy to have what is left of it. But entire towns, there's Sugarville, there's Lowell. They all got swallowed by the pit. They moved a lot of those houses out of there into other neighborhoods in Bisbee. So again, they had a plan, and they dug a big hole. And obviously, I wanted to include Bisbee Blue, specifically in that turquoise is a special turquoise that has its own name of Bisbee Blue, and people still hunt for it around Bisbee. And an interesting story, I have one of our patrons works security for the mine. Obviously, they don't do any mining here anymore, but they maintain all their property, and people still sneak on and try to dig up that Bisbee Blue because that's how valuable it is, and that's how beautiful it is.
Wow. See, because I know like the Kingman turquoise is unique. I didn't realize there was a Bisbee Blue as well.
Yeah. Yep.
Jason, do you have like a bolo of Bisbee Blue or anything?
No, but the interest. So we've got a great partnership with the mine, and during our summer programs with the kids, we actually go on mine property, and they allowed us to dig for turquoise in a certain area, and we did find little pieces of it, which is really cool. They let the kids keep it, which that's pretty special.
Indeed. And so there's all kinds of things that they were mining in Bisbee.
I actually didn't know this. Like I've lived here for 14 years, and when I started looking at these questions and their answers, I wanted to dive in more to it. But 325 distinct mineral species out of that mine. Obviously copper was the number one, but they found literally tons of other things, which is, it's pretty cool. I know that. And
not even just old stuff. I mean, there we have an 86 something.
Yeah.
Kid Creek.
Yes, stuff is still being found.
Wow.
And just take a look at some of those.
My gosh, that's.
You almost think that you found them on another planet, Planet Bisbee. Remarkable. Really
well, and in some ways it is Planet Bisbee.
Absolutely. We are our own planet down here.
Indeed. And that's part of the beauty of Bisbee.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can find all kinds of books about Bisbee. Could you find these in the library by chance?
Yes. So I picked books that are specifically here. These are all there's the Graham family, who I mentioned, that Doug Graham works at the Queen Mine Tour, but the whole family is so deeply rooted in Bisbee and mining. And each of these books is a different Graham person. So there's and this Forgotten Caves of Bisbee. If you can see that cover.
I know. I'm like,
that was a cave that's now sealed up, but that's got the it almost looks like Karchner Caverns, and that still exists. It's somewhere. No one will tell us where exactly it is because they don't want anyone getting in there, but it's still there.
Wow.
Yeah. And these.
So if you're down in Bisbee, be sure to stop by the library and take a look at these books. I mean, that Forgotten Caves is just beautiful. It's like when I'm down there after Thanksgiving, I'm going to swing by and stop and take a look at the Forgotten Caves of Bisbee because I want to remember some of those caves.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Although I'm not going to go looking for them because I'm not supposed to go look for them, so I'm not going to. All right, so question 3. Naco, Arizona is famous for what 1929 event?
So this is a kind of a really interesting story. This is the first aerial bombardment of the U.S. And this picture here is showing a car that was bombed by rebels. And this is in Naco, Arizona. And this is, Naco is, we call it our sister city, but it's about 6 miles away and it's right on the border of Mexico and it borders Naco, Sonora, Mexico. But this is an interesting story, and that how this happened actually. So this 1929. So there was a conflict in northern Mexico. It's called the Escobar Revolution. It was pretty short lived, so the rebels would hire out pilots, and this pilot in particular, who dropped this bomb on his own soil, is Patrick Murphy, and he had a bi-winged airplane, and what he did with it, he performed tricks with it, and so he decided to help the rebels, and he offered to build homemade bombs and drop them on specific federal positions, including Mexican trenches. And so the rebels, this was a thing, like rebels hired out these pilots. And so they took up his offer. And so 3 of his bombs inadvertently landed on the Arizona side of the border. It hit a couple different buildings. The first one went through the roof of Newton's garage, and that was on the Arizona side of it. And it's the kind of ironic thing of this story was that a car was being stored in this garage, and it was owned by a Mexican general who had stored it on the U.S. side for safekeeping. So,
that didn't work out.
Really worked out according to plan. So I shouldn't be laughing. After the bombing, so they actually shot down Murphy's plane. And it landed in Naco, Sonora. He survived. He managed to escape and get back to the United States, and he served a brief time in prison in Nogales. And really, that's about all the information I could find on that. But that's a huge historical event for the United States, and right here in our backyard.
And in the little town of Naco.
Yeah, so right. Naco is a very, very sleepy town. And, I think I have a picture later. So that's just the customs. We like to walk over and have lunch in Naco, Sonora. They have great restaurants over there.
I know. I love going over across the border to go eat because, oh my gosh, some really good restaurants.
Really, and it's like, who can say like, oh, I went to another country for lunch, and it's like you're back in 10 minutes back, a drive back up into the Mule Mountains there. And Camp Naco, I put Camp Naco in for a couple reasons, but one reason, so that Camp Naco ended up on the United States 11 most endangered historical places this past year. And of course, when that happens, a bunch of money floods in, and the governor's office is giving $4.5 million to rehab that. And Yeah, so it started off as it was started off as a military camp, as part of the Mexican border project. And it's also really well known because Buffalo Soldiers spent time there. And it also played a really crucial role in the Mexican Revolution in the early 1900s. And there was actually a Battle of Naco. And this is really interesting. So the Mexican Revolution is going on. And what do Bisbee people do? They drive down to the border and sit on the hoods of their cars and watch the fighting. And actually, so, and I've heard this story. I don't know if it's true or not, but the way that they were, the Mexicans were firing, at one point they were going north and south. And obviously if you're firing north, you're going to go into Arizona, and the US asked them to switch their fighting east to west, so no stray bullets would come across. I don't know if that's a true story. I've heard that a couple times. I find it interesting. And maybe that's proved enough safety for our Bisbee people to go down there and watch the war. So here's just some more historic photos. There's to the right, the Siege of Naco, that's on the Mexican side. But yeah, a front row seat to a major event in world history.
And
okay, so this is the I grabbed this from the Bisbee Mining.
Oh, I didn't even see this photo. Okay, so this is spectators sitting on their hoods.
Yes.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
That really is. That's crazy. And I want to know more about it.
This is a new book, really well reviewed, long listed for the 2022 National Book Award. Really kind of looks at the U.S. and Mexican relations at the time of this revolution that was literally going on just miles from us. So yeah, that's my pick for further research.
All right, and name the poltergeist for mischievous rooms at the Copper Queen.
It's Billy. If you've ever stayed at the Copper Queen, we've had ghost hunters and ghost hunting TV shows, and you name it. People specifically coming down here, renting rooms to specifically see ghosts. I actually stayed in the Copper Queen Hotel before I moved to Bisbee. I myself did not have any paranormal experiences, but
and like we always tell people, you never quite know if you're going to have an experience or not. It's not dependent necessarily even on you. It could be all kinds of other things going on. So,
so just a rundown of who Billy was. He's a young ghost, and he died in the early 20th century at our nearby San Pedro River, which is about 15-minute drive away. And so it said that his parents were once longtime employees of the hotel, and that Billy had come back for them. Okay, so then there's another version of the story that suggests that Billy, who was 8 years old, that he drowned in one of the room's bathtubs, and to cover up the wrongdoing, Billy's parents allegedly made up the lie that he died at the river.
Oh, so it's a little bit of a whodunit. Interesting. Oh, and there we have the San Pedro River.
Yeah, so I wanted to include this because this is really one of the most special places of this area. This is the last free-flowing river in Arizona, and so that means there's no dams. except beaver dams. There's lots of beaver dams down there, but a really special place, a great riparian area to watch birds and other wildlife. And it's one of our north flowing rivers. So it starts in Mexico and flows north through Cochise County and up along the Rayito Mountains in Tucson.
Wow. And
so, of course, there's going to be lots of picks for this. And these are all great books. That goes to the Copper Queen. Those are actual little writings that that visitors to the hotel put in if they've experienced anything. And it's kind of like a log book. And then these other books, Haunted Bisbee, Paranormal Arizona, Southern Arizona's Most Haunted, has some of our, we've got a couple ghost tours going on in town. And one of the owners of one of the tours wrote.
Indeed, Francine.
And Francine, yes, who wrote another book, Mirena, which is another really popular. Francine did a Zoom presentation for us last Halloween on her book, and it was really, really great. So yeah, and the ghost tour. The funny thing is, when we're closing on a Tuesday night, there somehow we're always timed where the ghost tour is at the bottom of our library stairs, and we're going home, and they're telling tales of possibly the library being haunted. I'm in here now, all the lights are off except my desk lamp. I've never, as I say this now, I'm listening, I've never experienced anything paranormal, but I guess the night's not over.
That is true. The night is still young, even in Bisbee. All right. Okay. So now this sounds like such a trick question because 100-year floods occurred in August of.
So 1908, man. So, those 100-year floods that they say they only come every 100 years. And I actually I put this question in because there's just so many really cool photos of these floodwaters.
Yeah.
And that just showing the destruction, the aftermath. This was obviously, this flood was before our canal was built. We have a canal, drainage canal now that runs along and then under Tombstone Canyon, and then spills out into the open pit of the mine. This is pictures of the library here. And so there's water coming off the second floor of the library. So explain that one. That's how bad the flood was. And then here these people are standing right at our post office entrance. Again.
Yeah, just all that water is just there. It's like, beautiful but horrifying photos, because then you start to realize just how much power that water has. Yeah.
And if you've ever been to Bisbee in the summer, we had a spectacular rainy season this summer, and it's gorgeous here. The hills green up, it's spectacular. And then the thunderstorm lightning shows at night are just they're better. It's the best entertainment, really. It's actually my favorite season in Bisbee.
Indeed. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, just
walls of water.
What a harsh environment. You're going from just these rainstorms that just bring all this water to just periods of drought and heat. These early Bisbee residents, they were resilient, man. They cleaned up, they rebuilt, and we're still here today.
Indeed.
But check that out.
Wow.
Yeah, I love, the kitchen cabinet there with the door. It's these are a great snapshot into early Bisbee.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, so
oh my gosh.
Now I put this one in because I swear this is the first Photoshop photo ever released, because I still don't understand what I'm looking at. So we got the library there on the left-hand side, and what looks like just an ocean of water coming down Main Street.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. One of those 100-year floods.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. This picture, this was not a flood. This was they were preparing for fire, but this is one of my favorite photographs of ours, that they moved the pianos out. This is what they wanted to save during, so there's floods and fires. 1908 was a really bad year for Bisbee. But just seeing this, it puts a smile on my face, because, they're saving their pianos.
Exactly. They're saving the music, the entertainment.
Music.
Oh, and then, okay. So Felix.
So Felix, the story cracks me up, but so Felix was a black cat. He worked underground in the mines for 15 years. He was born underground. He was raised by miners on the 1500 level, so 1500 feet down into the earth, in what was called the Sacramento Division. And he exclusively lived in dark tunnels and crosscuts, and his job was pest control. And someone wrote a little biography of Felix, and it's kind of funny, but according to firsthand accounts, Felix was a loner in his younger years and had few acquaintances. And as he grew older, he liked the companionship of the miners. And he actually, in 1927, this is a true story, he was named Employee of the Month for the mining company. And he was featured on page 6 of the Copper Queen Bulletin. So that came out every month. And that was just all the news that was that miners needed to know. And then 2 months later, another feature appeared in the Copper Queen Bulletin with the header, "Felix breaks 15-year service record when overtaken by Grim Reaper." So Felix unfortunately did pass away. And I don't know if this is sad or uplifting, but so he was given a final resting place in a powder box, and he was outside of, in the sunlight, and it was his first and last trip into the sunlight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Felix.
Indeed. All right. So what author wrote about Bisbee in Tacey Cromwell?
Yeah, so Conrad Richter. Conrad Richter was he won the Pulitzer Prize for one of his books. He had a Awakening Land trilogy, and but Tacey Cromwell was written in 1942, and a really kind of important story. Tacey was a woman. She was a madam in Colorado, and she ended up in Bisbee and ended up living on Brewery Gulch, which, if you've ever been to Bisbee, Brewery Gulch is where Bisbee's red light district was back in the day. And so Tacey has a really hard time in Bisbee with some of the upper elite. She kind of has that, that stigma of this life as a madam and with prostitution and everything. And it's funny, we read this for a book club one year, and it's really cool that a Pulitzer Prize winning author wrote this story, you know, kind of maybe mid-career. And I'm not sure. I want to investigate more. I don't know if Conrad Richter spent time in Bisbee, but you know, Brewery Gulch was pretty notorious. Still is for you know, other reasons. It's got a really a flavorful history. I'll put it that way. But yeah, check it out. Tacey Cromwell, the story of takes place in Bisbee. And then I just included these. There's one of the crib houses, and I couldn't find there's some of these still exist up the Gulch. And our design review panel won't let people make drastic changes to their dwellings. So when someone bought one of these crib houses, they actually kept all the doors and all the windows. They don't actually all open, but they're on the building itself.
Okay.
Yeah, and I couldn't find the picture, and I couldn't get up there today, but it still gives you that when you're walking up there today, that sense of history and place, really.
Right.
And yeah, just more pictures of early Brewery Gulch. And then I've included this. This is the Norton House, was in the red light district, and then just a list of the different houses that existed that we know of.
Wow.
Yeah, really great history. And this was compiled by one of the Graham brothers. He wrote a book. I think the next slide, his book. Yes, Whispers of the Underworld. So, you know, did a lot of research. You know, there's names of, you know, we've got actually have names of these women and who they were. We know what they did. But beyond that, just kind of as much of a human story as they could find to tell this story.
Wow. All right. So how many saloons did Bisbee have from the 1800s to 1915?
So it was obvious that saloons were not banned until 1955. That Bisbee was all about saloons, 160 of them through that time. And, you know, that's what miners did, you know, and I included this, the library picture. This is a picture of our main floor of the library. This is circa 1920, but that was one of the rules in the library, that there was no gambling and no drinking. That was meant for the saloon.
Now, is that still a rule at the library? I'm wondering if you allow gambling or drinking nowadays in the library. Maybe a little poker game going off in the corner.
So these days we play chess, and not for money, but really, what they did do was, you can see all the spittoons that are at each end of the table. They had a lot of tobacco.
Nice. Oh, and there we go, St. Elmo's.
So notorious St. Elmo's since 1902. That's up the Gulch. That is still if you ever come to Bisbee, you must stop by St. Elmo's. It's the local watering hole. Great live music.
And all kinds of things. It is indeed a fun place to go. And just, I mean, I think, is it the oldest bar in Arizona?
I think it has some.
I don't think I'm using the right words. I mean, there's very precise words.
There is something.
And
I included this other picture. This is also the library to the left. It was our second library before the current one was built. But Elmo's was right across the street from the library, which I spotted that one time looking at pictures, and I circled it. Because I thought that was so interesting, that it wasn't always on the Gulch, that it was on Main Street and then moved up there.
Yeah.
And then we've got we've got a horse in our 15-minute parking. So. So this is a recently published book by Tom Vaughn, and if you want to learn more about Bisbee's saloon, he's got a whole book on saloon life.
All right, the Bisbee deportation striking miners where?
So Columbus, New Mexico. So really briefly, the Bisbee deportation is one of the most, I think, important events that happened in Arizona. We about 1,200 striking miners were rounded up one morning. There was a roundup right outside of our library. Rounded up, they were marched about 3 miles over to our ball field, which is in our Warren district, and they were loaded up on train cars, and they were literally just shipped to Columbus, New Mexico, dropped off, and left to fend for themselves. There is the picture of part of the roundup going on, and they were rounded up by gunpoint. There was, they didn't have a choice, and they were, some of them were pulled out of their homes. This was a really important day in labor history. Here's them being marched through the hills of Bisbee. There's the train cars. There was a really great documentary made for the anniversary of the deportation. There, that Bisbee 17. If you haven't seen that, it kind of blends modern day with the past, and a really interesting way to tell the story. And we at the library worked with this film team. We had a whole summer of programming on specifically the deportation and some other things that were going on at that time, including the Mexican Revolution, that just all kind of played together. And then, of course, Robert Houston's Bisbee 17 is a fictionalized version of the event. And then a new book that just came out last year, another book on the Bisbee deportation. Yeah.
All right. And what remains were found outside of Bisbee in the early 50s?
So it was the mammoth. So they found a mammoth kill site, which is really cool. I mean, you're talking about a time when our landscape looked a lot different than it looks now, and so that a mammoth could survive here. So this is down in Naco as well. So Naco comes up a couple times tonight, and so they found, I think 8 Clovis points in this mammoth.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just.
And that there's just an artist's rendition of possibly what that may have looked like. Yeah, so there's a few sites. There's Murray Springs over towards Sierra Vista. It was another site that they found a mammoth, and that's you can see that. So yeah, there's a lot more grass and a lot more water was available out here during that time. So even longer before that, we were an ancient sea out here. So we actually can find when you're digging and in rock conglomerates, you will still find seashell remnants of little sea creatures. Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Well, I always like to end with asking people how they did, because I mean, typically people don't do very well on the quiz, but I always like to say, Oh, and Anders, do you know where the bones wound up? I mean, I'm wondering.
So they're at the Arizona State Museum. The University of Arizona.
So yeah, you can go see the mammoth. Who knew? Very cool. So yeah, so wow. I mean, that's what I love about Bisbee is it's like there's always more twists and turns.
Yeah, there's a lot to uncover here, and this was really fun to do, just to kind of explore these questions. And obviously, when you ask a question, you come up with another question, because and it's, you kind of just, it's a fun little rabbit hole to fall down. And especially, we've got a lot of great resources here, and finding the answers either in books or our people made it really easy. We've got some really great local historians that helped me with some of these answers, and just some follow-up questions. So yeah, we're chock full of history, and maybe some, hopefully some people learn some unexpected histories tonight.
Oh, I'm sure people did learn all kinds of unexpected things. I mean, Fatty Arbuckle hanging out in Bisbee. Who, again, it's like it's like every time you turn a page or open a door, there's a whole new mystery to solve.
Yeah.
So Jason, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your passion and your rabbit holes of Bisbee. So thank you so much, Jason. Have a great rest of your night. And I definitely will look you up when I come in town, where we also have Francine down at the Greenway House.
Greenway.
Which, and so we were talking, and we assume that that's where they planned the deportation, was likely at the Greenway House. So it was kind of another level, like, because it was like that would have been. So it's like, oh
yeah, that would have been where some very important people might have met and talked.
Right. And so very good. Well, I look forward to seeing you in just a couple of weeks.
Okay. Thank you, Marshall.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your night.
You too.
Bye. Oh my gosh, Jason, thank you so much. That was so intriguing. And that's part of the fun of just going down those rabbit holes and finding more and more stories. And so since we're in Bisbee, talking about Bisbee, I thought about one of my favorite buildings that a lot of times people just walk by and don't really give much credence to, but the Cochise County Courthouse. Now, a lot of times people focus in on the statue at the very front, but I think, that building, I mean, the county was formed back in the early 1880s. The county seat was relocated from Tombstone to Bisbee as kind of a slight to Tombstone back in the late 20s. When Phelps Dodge pretty much owned a majority of Bisbee and the Copper Queen mine, and they actually donated the land on top of the hill to build this. Now, it was built in 1930 as part of the WPA project, and it was done by Roy Place, who was a Tucson architect. And I mean, it is oh so 1930s, and that's the thing. If you don't get up and walk up onto the landing to see the fountain, to see the doors, to see the lamppost, I mean, it's just such a gorgeous building from every side you look at it. It doesn't take a bad photo. And I went through a lot of photos and they were all gorgeous. So this is one of my favorite buildings in Bisbee. And I would dare to say one of my favorite in Southern Arizona, just because it is so beautiful and just so majestic. So now you'll see why I always suggest that you can share if you're on Facebook, because we have so much fun with Arizona history. Now, coming up next week, next Thursday at 7:00, we have Chris Kolash, who is a local artist. And it was so funny when we started talking, she was like going to talk about kind of Sunny Slope, But as we got to talking, she was like, she first got here, she was working for a company that built miniatures. And then she's talking about the things she was building miniatures for. And it was like, Chris, those are the stories you need to be telling. And so that's going to be a really amazing show. We don't know where most of those models wound up, but hopefully, we're going to have some fun with that. And see you next week. I love hearing from you all. So please, if you share some stories, share whatever, it's all good. Hello, PJ. Thank you so much for such a tasty cocktail tonight. That's going to wind up, if it's not already on some menu somewhere you're working on, it's well worth it. So it's pretty darn good. And so as we say goodnight, I want to say a shout out to Chris and Cole, who created that intro video. And because the weather changing, you might have noticed we went from hot to cold literally overnight. And, I know lots of folks who are having kind of seasonal allergies. So we are going to hear all about Dristan.
When hay fever pollen invades your sinuses, brings runny nose, watery eyes, take Dristan. Dristan's like sending your sinuses to Arizona. Yes, Dristan's like sending your sinuses to Arizona. That is, Dristan helps you breathe free and easy, as if you were far away from pollen or allergy irritation. Yes, Dristan's like sending your sinuses to Arizona. Helps dry, runny nose, itchy, watery eyes. You see, Dristan tablets shrink swollen, congested nasal and sinus passages which cause runny nose and watery eyes. So you breathe free and easy fast. So when pollen invades your sinuses causing hay fever miseries, don't wish you could be in sunny, dry Arizona. Just remember, Dristan's like sending your sinuses to Arizona. Get Dristan decongestant tablets.